was defending Peter to my friends the exact moment he was planning how to replace me. We sat at my favorite coffee shop, the one with chipped blue mugs and terrible lighting. Sarah said I deserved better. Marcus called Peter selfish. I laughed it off, telling them they didn't understand our connection. Peter worked late because he was building our future, I explained. He missed dinners because he cared about providing for us. Every excuse rolled off my tongue like a rehearsed speech. I had become his lawyer without ever passing the bar. My phone buzzed. A text from Peter. Working late again. Don't wait up. I showed them the message as proof of his dedication. They exchanged looks I pretended not to see. That night, I drove home alone, replaying my defense in my head, proud of how fiercely I protected him. I had no idea that across town, Peter was introducing someone else as his future. Then his phone lit up on our kitchen counter the next morning. A message preview that changed everything. And I read it. After 15 years of loving him, Peter ended us with the same tone you'd use to cancel a subscription. He sat across from me at our dinner table, the one we'd bought together at an estate sale 7 years ago. His face showed no emotion, no tears, no trembling hands, just calm, practiced words. I think we've grown apart, he said, cutting his steak like we were discussing the weather. 15 years reduced to a corporate breakup speech. I felt my chest collapse inward, but my face stayed frozen. Is there someone else? I whispered. He paused for exactly 3 seconds. That's not relevant to us anymore. Not relevant. 15 years of sleeping beside him, learning his breathing patterns, memorizing which side of the bed he preferred. Not relevant. I watched him chew his food slowly, deliberately. He had rehearsed this. Probably in his car before coming home. Maybe in the shower that morning. What he said next broke something in me permanently. I need you to understand this isn't your fault. But his eyes told a different story. The worst part wasn't that Peter cheated. It was realizing I had taught him I would survive it. For 15 years, I absorbed every disappointment like a sponge. When he forgot my birthday, I planned my own party and invited him. When he criticized my cooking, I took classes. When he came home angry, I became quieter, smaller, less demanding. I had trained him step by step, that I would bend but never break. That I would cry but never leave. Every time I forgave without consequence, I handed him a manual on how to hurt me safely. I became predictable in my pain, reliable in my forgiveness. He knew exactly how much he could take before I would crumble, and he stayed just below that line. For years. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror that night, mascara streaking down my face, and saw someone I didn't recognize. A woman who had made herself so small that disappearing wouldn't even leave a mark. And he knew it. He counted on it. She walked into my home like she belonged there, because Peter had already given her permission. I was loading the dishwasher when I heard the front door open. Too confident to be a stranger. Too familiar to be a guest. She appeared in the kitchen doorway holding a yoga mat, wearing leggings I'd seen advertised on Instagram. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was practiced. "Oh," she said, not surprised at all. "You're still here. Still here. In my own home. Like I was the intruder. Like I was overstaying my welcome in the life I'd built." Peter appeared behind her, his hand on her lower back. That same hand that used to find mine under restaurant tables. "This is Melissa," he said. No explanation. No apology. Just a name. She extended her hand for a shake, and I noticed her nails matched her outfit. Coordinated. Prepared. And she knew my name. "Nice to finally meet you," Melissa said, emphasizing finally like she'd heard stories. Peter watched me cry and apologize for a betrayal he committed. And he didn't stop me. I broke down in our living room 3 days after meeting Melissa. The weight of everything crushed my chest until words spilled out like a confession. "I'm sorry I wasn't enough," I sobbed. "I'm sorry I worked too much. I'm sorry I stopped trying with my appearance. I'm sorry I got comfortable." Peter sat on the couch, arms crossed, listening to me apologize for his affair. He nodded occasionally, made thoughtful sounds. Let me take responsibility for his choices. I appreciate you being honest with yourself, he said when I finally stopped talking. Appreciate. Like I'd done him a favor by destroying myself. He never said, "This isn't your fault." He never said, "I made a mistake." He just absorbed my apology like it was owed to him. That was the moment I almost disappeared. That was the moment I became a ghost in my own life, apologizing for existing while he rewrote history to make himself the victim of my inadequacy. I begged Peter to choose me, not knowing he had already packed his heart for someone else. It happened on a Tuesday night, exactly 2 weeks after meeting Melissa. I wore the blue dress he once said made my eyes look brighter. I cooked his favorite meal, garlic shrimp pasta with too much butter, just how he liked it. I lit candles, poured wine. I became a performance of the woman I thought he wanted. When he came home, he looked tired, inconvenienced. I asked him to sit down, talk, to remember us. "Peter, we can fix this," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. He pulled away gently like I was fragile, breakable. "I need you to choose me," I whispered, hating how desperate I sounded. "Choose us." "Choose 15 years. He looked at me with something close to pity. "I already made my choice," he said quietly. And he let me beg. He let me cry. He let me list all the reasons we belonged together while he mentally calculated how soon he could leave. People called me weak for staying, not realizing I was staying because I had nowhere left to fall. My sister called every day with the same advice. Just leave him. Like it was simple. Like 15 years could be packed into boxes and donated to Goodwill. My co-workers whispered at the water cooler. I heard the word doormat more than once. Even strangers on the internet, when I posted vaguely about heartbreak, told me I was choosing my own misery. But they didn't understand. Peter and I shared a lease, bank account, car payment, life. I had quit my better-paying job 5 years ago when he wanted to relocate for his promotion. I had let friendships dissolve because he didn't like how much time I spent away from home. I had built my entire existence around being Peter's partner. Without him, I wasn't just alone. I was erased. So yes, I stayed. Not because I was weak. Because I was terrified. Then I learned something that changed everything.
Before we continue, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has trusted this channel with their real-life stories. Your experiences don't just entertain. They teach, warn, and help others feel less alone. If you're watching and you have a life experience you think someone can learn from, feel free to share it with us. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if these stories move you in any way, please support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. It truly helps these voices reach more people.
I found something Peter never thought I would see, and my tears stopped instantly. I was looking for our insurance documents in his home office, a room I rarely entered. His filing cabinet was usually locked, but that day it hung open, slightly crooked. Inside, underneath folders labeled taxes and medical, I found a document with both our names. A life insurance policy, taken out 3 years ago. Me. For $1 million. Peter was the sole beneficiary. My hands shook as I read the details. Premium payments, all current. Policy active. Accidental death, double indemnity. I sat on his office floor holding proof that I was worth more to him dead than alive. The tears that had been constant for weeks just stopped. My breathing slowed. My mind cleared. Something sharp and focused replaced the fog of grief. My name was on it. And suddenly everything made terrible, perfect sense. Love didn't explode or scream. It quietly packed its bags and left my body. I can't pinpoint the exact moment it died. Maybe it was reading that insurance policy. Maybe it was watching Peter laugh at something Melissa texted while I sat across from him. Maybe it was the accumulation of 1,000 small cruelties that finally exceeded my capacity to feel. But one morning I woke up and realized the ache in my chest was gone. The desperate need for his approval had evaporated. The fantasy of fixing us had dissolved. I looked at Peter sleeping beside me and felt nothing. Not hatred, Not love. Just vast, empty nothing. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. I got up, made coffee, and realized I no longer cared if he noticed I'd stopped crying. I no longer needed him to choose me. Something colder replaced it. Something patient. Something that knew exactly what it was doing. And for the first time in 15 years, I smiled a smile that belonged only to me. Peter thought I was healing because I smiled again. He didn't know I was counting days until the lease ended. Counting the balance in our joint account. Counting the evidence I was quietly gathering. Became agreeable. Pleasant. I stopped asking where he was going. Stopped checking his phone. Stopped crying when he came home smelling like her perfume. You seem better, he said one morning surprised. I'm trying, I replied, pouring his coffee exactly how he liked it. He relaxed around me again. Started leaving his laptop open. Stopped password protecting his phone. He thought my compliance meant defeat. He thought my silence meant acceptance. He had no idea I was screaming on the inside, but the scream had transformed into something useful. Strategy. I documented everything. Screenshots, photos, dates and times. I consulted with a lawyer he didn't know I'd contacted. And time was on my side. Because Peter had gotten comfortable in his cruelty. And comfortable men make careless mistakes. I handed Peter the victory he thought he deserved. 2 months after finding the insurance policy, I suggested couples therapy. He looked shocked. Really? You'd do that? I nodded, playing the part of the devoted wife trying to save her marriage. We went to 3 sessions. I cried in all of them, admitted my flaws, asked what I could do better. The therapist, Dr. Chen, watched me with concern. Watched Peter with something else. Suspicion, maybe. After the 3rd session, Peter said therapy was helping him realize what he really wanted. I knew what was coming. I want a divorce, he said in the parking lot. I looked down, manufactured tears, then nodded. Okay, I whispered. If that's what you need. He seemed relieved, almost giddy. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, he said. We can keep it simple. Amicable. That lie cost him everything. Because I had never been more unreasonable in my entire life. I just learned to hide it behind the face he expected to see. When Peter finally asked for freedom, I didn't argue, I helped him. I agreed to his terms initially. Suggested we split everything 50-50. Acted like I trusted him to be fair. You handle the paperwork, I said sweetly. You're better at that stuff. He practically glowed with superiority. Over the next few weeks, I watched him draft a divorce agreement that heavily favored him. Our house, mostly his. Our savings, mostly his. My retirement account, somehow negotiable. He thought I wasn't reading the fine print. I read every word a dozen times, then had my secret lawyer read it too. Sign here, Peter said one evening, sliding papers across the table. Picked up the pen. Hesitated. Are you sure this is what you want? Yes. He nodded firmly. I'm sure. Sign. His shoulders relaxed. He actually smiled. Thank you for making this easy, he said. He never asked why. Why I wasn't fighting. Why I wasn't demanding more. Why I seemed almost eager to let him win. Men who underestimate you never ask the right questions. Peter looked at me and asked, Why are you so calm? It was 3 weeks after I'd signed his papers. We were packing up the house, dividing belongings into mine and his piles. Melissa was moving in next month. I was supposedly moving to a small apartment across town. I hummed while I worked, carefully wrapping dishes in newspaper. He stood in the doorway watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You've been really okay with everything, he said slowly. Why? I looked up at him, this man I'd loved for 15 years, this man who'd taken out life insurance on me, this man who thought I was too stupid to protect myself. And something dangerous must have flickered in my eyes because he actually stepped back. I'm just ready for a new chapter, I said softly. Aren't you? He nodded, but uncertainty crossed his face. For just a second he looked like he wanted to ask more questions. Smiled. Warm. Genuine. Terrifying. He left the room quickly, and I went back to packing, humming the same song. For the first time in 15 years, Peter didn't feel powerful around me. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. He started watching me carefully, listening to my phone conversations, asking who I was texting. Just my sister, I'd say. Or, just my lawyer confirming the final papers. That last one made him flinch. What else are you talking to your lawyer about? He asked one evening. I blinked innocently. Just making sure I understand everything. You want me to understand everything, right? He nodded slowly, but his confidence was cracking. He'd built his entire betrayal on the foundation of my weakness, and that foundation was shifting beneath him. One night, I caught him reading through the divorce papers again, like he was looking for something he'd missed. He glanced up when I entered the room, guilty, nervous. Just double-checking, he muttered. Of course, I said pleasantly. And he didn't know why. He didn't know what had changed, but he felt it. The power dynamic had reversed, and he couldn't pinpoint when or how. I didn't push Peter. I simply stopped protecting him. For years I had been his shield. When his boss called him unreliable, I made excuses. When his mother criticized his choices, I defended him. When his friends pointed out his flaws, I explained them away. I had been his PR team, his therapist, his cheerleader. And the moment I stopped, everything began to unravel. His boss started noticing his long lunches with Melissa. His mother, who I'd maintained a relationship with, stopped taking his calls after I quietly mentioned how he'd treated me. His friends, who I'd hosted countless dinners for, started seeing him differently when I wasn't there to soften his edges. I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't spread lies. I just removed myself from the equation and let him stand on his own. And gravity did the rest. Without me managing his image, his life, his relationships, Peter was just a man who'd betrayed his wife for a younger woman. Common. Disappointing. Alone in ways he didn't yet understand. Peter begged me not to leave the same way I once begged him to stay. Moving day arrived exactly 90 days after I'd signed his papers. The timeline he'd set. The timeline I'd agreed to. Movers loaded my boxes into a truck while Peter watched from the porch, Melissa conspicuously absent. Wait, he said as I carried the last box to my car. I turned, surprised by the panic in his voice. Maybe we're rushing this, he said quickly. Maybe we should try therapy again. Real therapy this time. I stared at him. This man who'd been so certain, so cold, so ready to replace me. I made a mistake, he continued. I wasn't thinking clearly. We can fix this. His voice broke on the last word. The same break that used to shatter my resolve. I said nothing. Just stood there holding a box of books, watching him spiral. Please, he whispered. Don't go. The word he'd refused me months ago. The word I desperately needed. Now it meant absolutely nothing. Silence hurts more when the other person finally understands what they lost. I didn't respond to Peter's begging. I simply loaded my last box, climbed into my car and drove away. No dramatic speech. No final confrontation. Just silence. And that silence followed him. He called 17 times that first week. I answered none of them. He texted paragraphs of apologies and explanations. I read them all but never replied. He showed up at my new apartment, which wasn't the small place I'd mentioned but a beautiful 2-bedroom condo I'd secured with money he didn't know I had. He knocked for 20 minutes while I sat inside reading a book, completely calm. The silence destroyed him in ways my tears never could. Because when I was crying, begging, fighting, he had power. He could dismiss me, manage me, control the narrative. But my silence gave him nothing to push against. Nothing to manipulate. Just endless, echoing space where his guilt could grow. And Peter finally understood. He'd lost someone who truly loved him. And I was never coming back. Peter wanted to rewrite history. erase his cruelty and keep my loyalty. 6 weeks after I moved out, he sent me a long email. In it, he painted himself as confused, lost, going through a midlife crisis. He minimized the affair. "It wasn't serious with Melissa," he wrote. "I was just scared of commitment." 15 years together, and he was scared of commitment. He rewrote our ending, making himself the victim of circumstance rather than the architect of betrayal. He wanted me to remember the good times, the early years, the trips we took, the dreams we shared. He wanted to erase the insurance policy, the coldness, the calculated cruelty. He wanted me to forget that he'd let me apologize for his affair, that he'd introduced his mistress in my kitchen, that he'd dismantled my self-worth piece by piece. He wanted history to be gentle to him. I refused. I replied with just 3 words. "I remember everything." And I did. Every moment, every hurt, every calculated move. The truth was my weapon now, and he couldn't rewrite it. When Peter finally apologized, it sounded rehearsed and empty. He showed up at my office 3 months post-divorce, waiting in the parking lot like a movie stalker. "I'm sorry," he said when I emerged after work. "I'm truly, deeply sorry for everything." The words were right. The cadence was practiced. But his eyes were calculating, not remorseful. He wasn't sorry for hurting me. He was sorry he'd lost something valuable. Sorry his life with Melissa wasn't the fantasy he'd imagined. Sorry his friends and family had sided with me. Sorry he was lonely. "I hope you can forgive me," he continued. "For closure." Closure. The word selfish people use when they want you to absolve them without earning it. I looked at this man I'd spent 15 years loving, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No pain. "I forgive you," I said, because it was true. I had forgiven him by letting him go. I was already gone. Emotionally. Mentally. Completely. And that terrified him more than hatred ever could. I walked away without money, revenge, or closure, and that terrified him. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in October. According to the papers Peter had drafted, the ones I'd signed so agreeably. He got the house, most of the savings, and the car. Got what looked like scraps. He seemed satisfied at the final hearing. Melissa waited outside, already planning furniture arrangements. But Peter kept glancing at me, searching for anger, tears, something. I smiled politely, shook the judge's hand, thanked my lawyer, and walked out without looking back. No dramatic exit. No shouted accusations. No demands for justice. Just a quiet departure that felt wrong to him. 'Cause he knew me. Knew I planned. Knew I calculated. Knew I wasn't the type to simply accept defeat. And my complete calm terrified him. Because he knew what was coming. He didn't know what or when or how. But somewhere deep in his guilty conscience, he understood that consequences don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they arrive in whispers. In silence. In the absence of the person who used to protect you from yourself. Everything started falling apart after I left. And I didn't touch a thing. Peter's life unraveled naturally, without my interference. His mother stopped calling after learning the full truth. His promotion fell through when his affair with a subordinate, Melissa, worked in his department, a detail he'd conveniently forgotten to mention, violated company policy. His friends drifted away when they realized he was exactly who I'd quietly suggested he was. Selfish, calculating, cruel. The house he'd fought so hard to keep became a money pit. Repairs I'd been managing for years suddenly became his problem. The roof leaked. The furnace died. The property taxes he'd never paid attention to came due. Melissa left him 4 months post-divorce when she realized Peter wasn't the successful, stable man she'd thought. He'd been stable because I'd made him stable. And without me, he was just a middle-aged man with debt and regrets. Including Peter. He was falling apart too. Calling me drunk at midnight. Crying about being alone. Asking if I ever really loved him. I never answered. Just let his calls go to voicemail, building a collection of his breakdown. The man who never cried for me was sobbing on the phone. It was a Thursday evening, 7 months after our divorce. My phone rang with Peter's number for the 43rd time. Usually I let it ring. But something, curiosity maybe, or the satisfaction of witnessing consequences, made me answer. "Hello," I said calmly. Silence. Then ragged breathing. Then crying. Actual shoulder-shaking crying. "I can't do this anymore," he sobbed. "Everything's falling apart. My job, my house, my life. I lost everything." "You didn't lose everything," I said quietly. "You chose everything." More crying. More apologies. More desperate explanations of how he'd realized his mistake. How he needed me. How he couldn't function without me. I listened. Said nothing. Let him pour out his pain the way I'd once poured out mine, expecting comfort that never came. "Please," he whispered finally. "Tell me what to do." And I realized this was the moment. The moment he'd reduced himself to exactly where he'd once reduced me. Broken. Begging. Desperate. I listened. And then I made a choice. I could have saved Peter, but saving him would have destroyed me again. For a brief moment on that phone call, I felt the old instinct rise up. The fixer. The helper. The woman who absorbed everyone's pain to make them comfortable. I could have offered advice. Could have told him how to repair his life. Could have eased his suffering with kind words and gentle guidance. I had the power to save him. But saving him would have required me to set myself on fire again. To sacrifice my peace for his comfort. To teach him once more that I would always be there to clean up his messes. And I had worked too hard to rebuild myself to tear it all down for a man who'd never valued the gift of my loyalty. "I can't help you, Peter," I said softly. "You have to figure this out yourself." "But I don't know how," he cried. "Learn," I said. And I meant it. So I chose myself. Chose my peace. I chose the life I was building in the quiet absence of his chaos. And I hung up the phone. My revenge wasn't loud, violent, or illegal. It was permanent. People always ask what I did to get back at Peter. They expect a dramatic story. Slash tires. Public humiliation. Legal warfare. But my revenge was simpler and more devastating than any of that. I simply became happy. Thrive. I took the scraps from our divorce, which included the retirement account Peter thought was negotiable, and discovered my lawyer had protected it completely. I used my freedom to rebuild. Got promoted twice in 8 months. Traveled to places Peter always said were too expensive. Made friends who actually valued me. Started dating someone who treated me with basic respect and was shocked by how revolutionary it felt. And irreversible. Because every day I spent being happy was a day Peter had to live knowing he'd destroyed the best thing in his life. He had to watch from a distance, as I became everything he'd told me I couldn't be. Strong. Independent. Whole. My happiness was his punishment. My peace was his torture. And unlike a confrontation or a dramatic gesture, it lasted forever. Every single day, he woke up knowing he'd lost. And I woke up knowing I'd won. Peter lives every day knowing he lost the only person who ever loved him completely. I saw him recently by accident at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older. Tired. He was alone, scrolling through his phone with the desperate energy of someone trying to fill empty time. He saw me before I could leave. Eyes met. He half stood like he wanted to approach. I gave him a small, polite nod. Nothing more. Because I didn't hate him anymore. Hatred requires energy, passion, investment. I had moved past him entirely. He was just a man I used to know. A chapter I'd closed. A lesson I'd learned. As I walked away, I realized this was the revenge that would haunt him forever. Not anger. Not bitterness. Not dramatic confrontation. Just my complete and total indifference. Just my visible happiness. Just the knowledge that I was better off without him in every possible way. And I live peacefully because I finally chose me. Chose my worth. Chose my future. And I learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building a beautiful life with someone who didn't deserve to be in it, and letting them watch from outside, knowing they can never come back. That's the revenge that still shocks people. Quiet kind. The permanent kind. The kind that lasts forever. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you have a story to tell, you're not alone here.